This is Nhlanhla Sikhosana outside the Zimbabwe embassy. We are here at the Zimbabwe vigil. I've just pulled Mr. Chris Madondo out of the crowd and I'm going to ask him a few questions. Brother Chris, what do you think about the Zimbabwe vigil as it is going on?
My brother, I think it's a noble cause. It should go on until the day we get free elections in our country. True democracy. Something which has ceased to exist under the ZANU-PF regime.
As you say, true democracy, do you think in an undemocratic government or undemocratic party such as the ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe, do you think demonstrations like this or demonstrations in the streets of Harare, do you think they help?
They do serve a purpose. They highlight our plight to the rest of the world and those that can see us. We get to play our part within the international community, but those back home even have a greater struggle, and we have to work in solidarity with them. And for that reason, I say it is a noble cause again, my brother.
On that note then, what are your thoughts on the attitude that other African countries have towards the situation in Zimbabwe, in particular our southern neighbor South Africa?
Well, there is apathy within the SADC community. I do not know whether it's because of Mugabe's past influence or perceived importance within the region. But I believe that power, it does lie within the people. And Mugabe has got no support from the people. The sooner they learn that, the better. Otherwise, we are going to have the same that is happening in Libya, Tunisia, all those Middle Eastern crises, they will come down to Zimbabwe. Remember, we've been there first, and we will keep calling for Mugabe to go. People are being tortured, being killed, women being raped, and nobody is saying anything about it, or those that can say anything about it are being beaten into submission, but we will refuse.
As you mentioned earlier, there's a wave of optimism coming from up North Africa, Libya, Egypt and Tunisia. Would you like to see something of the same happening in the streets of Harare? Because it seems like trying to use democratic ways has failed to work. Do you think that is the only option to free Zimbabwe?
In actual fact, I think what's happening in those countries is a democratic thing. When the masses speak, that is the voice of democracy, and it should be the same thing in Zimbabwe. When it's time for everybody to call on Mugabe to go, I suggest that everybody goes on the streets until he steps down. With his ZANU-PF regime, the head of the police, the army, and the Central Intelligence Organization should be disbanded. For those people speaking first-hand information, I know they are a torturous crew. That's the reason why I ran away from them. And I feel pity for those who are still behind. And we need to see that we support those back home. I do know the likes of Munyarazi Gwisai and his associates were calling for that. But in typical demonstration of Zimbabwe's lack of freedom of speech, they were taken to prison and they've got charges impending. And if nobody highlights that there's no freedom, this will go on under our nose and nobody will say anything. So I keep saying, change Zimbabwe. Mugabe must step down. Change Amaitiro.
While everybody is calling for Mugabe to go, he seems to be planning elections, and you know how his elections work. He seems to be trying to consolidate his stay in power and to try and push out the MDC government partners he has in the government. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, on that subject, I think the reason why he's calling for the elections is because he's already consolidated his base. Having manipulated MDC, he's split it into two factions. And he thinks he's now got a grip. The time is not yet ripe for elections. For we do not have a new constitution which is non-partisan. Because as we stand here, where I'm standing for the raw restoration of human rights in Zimbabwe, we are calling for non-partisan constitution, which is something that has not happened. This constitution should not be formed by MDC, it should not be formed by ZANU-PF. It should be a document which protects present and future generations. And that has not been happening, and no elections are fair as long as we don't have the basic foundation for freedom.
The MDC and ZANU-PF, they formed what they call the coalition government or the global political agreement. What are your thoughts about this agreement?
Well, my thoughts are that was a bit of a sellout on Tsvangirai's part. He should have not settled with the enemy and let him brush away what is done in the past, because the past cannot remain hidden. Had it been Adolf Hitler and he had made peace, were we going to accept it with all the Jews that he killed? We've had the Matabeleland crisis. It's all lying, going down. Nobody's saying anything. We've got people being killed day and night. Freedom of speech being suppressed. We cannot turn a blind eye to that, because it takes many, many good men to turn a blind man eye for one evil man to rise above all. And that, I say again, once and for all, never ever will we let that happen, my brother.
What message would you like to pass to our fellow supporters of the vigil and people back home in Zimbabwe and all across the world, Zimbabweans all over the world? What sort of message would you like to send across to them as they watch this?
My message is the same. Get up, stand up and fight for your rights. Never ever give up the fight. Don't give up the fight. The enemy lies within the system from ZANU-PF. It's not only Mugabe, but him and his goons. They should go. And we should fight for them to live.
What about, I do not even like to call him president, because in my eyes, we know who our president is. The people voted for him, except that the results of the elections were not accepted. But what is your message to Mr. Mugabe?
Well, my message to Robert Mugabe is, stop killing people. Stop imposing yourself upon the people of Zimbabwe. Step down. If you have got anything to step down from, because you have got no authority, please just move away. Because you are doing everyone a disservice. Those that died in the liberation war, present generations and future generations, you have outlived your usefulness. You have become a liability. Please, please, Mr. Mugabe, leave us alone.
Thank you for talking with us. Will you continue to come here until there are free and fair elections and the rule of law in Zimbabwe?
Till the day that Zimbabwe has free elections, or the day that I drop dead, my brother, I will fight for the end of ZANU-PF rule and for freedom of my people, my children, my wife, my generation, and everybody else. This should be a message to the rest of the world. Not only do we campaign for Zimbabwe, we are saying to the rest of the world, it's unacceptable for the minority to impose their rule on the majority. Thank you, my brother.
All right, thank you for speaking to us.